Hello, dear listeners, and welcome to the VVA podcast. My name is Leila Resme.
And I'm Cristina Tumino.
And today's episode is episode number 5, entitled, It is Not the System.
Yes, today we're talking about systems and traditions. And we will actually start as we used to do normally by looking up the word in the dictionary. So what is tradition? Tradition, I'm going to read it, is the transmission of customs or beliefs from generation to generation. So it's something that is a custom. So it's something that was built in time and in some way as it kind of worked and was tested in some way, then it started to become something more solid. It's like giving kind of a structure and a foundation for a community to kind of ideally work better in some way. It gives values and anything that can create that kind of structure.
And yeah, like you said, it's really important to actually realize that it's something that evolves over a really long period of time. And that is actually, it creates the whole foundation for our society. It's not just something that someone has made up. It's something that has been going on for, many, many years. And we use it to, preserve ancient wisdom, for example, and to create like a sort of guideline for the society.
Yes, but of course, then it has the kind of positive aspects and the negative aspects, because is tradition always good, or can all tradition be bad? So we're going to understand when is good, when is bad, or if it's the case of actually not consider tradition, or if we do need to value tradition in this podcast. So what are the good aspects that we kind of found thinking of tradition and systems? So as we were already mentioning, it's about creating these foundations and preserving this kind of ancient wisdom, because in reality, things that have been even for like more than 2,000 years ago that were considered important back then can be quite valid as well now in some way. So when traditions are good, kind of, they're still valid after so many years.
They withstand the test of time, basically. But of course, it can happen that traditions can sort of grow a bit rigid, and sometimes they can actually get in the way of, the evolution of a society, because people are unwilling to adapt and change in a positive direction. Of course, it's important to remember that sometimes the change can be progressive, but sometimes it can be regressive, which is why we're having this conversation, so that we understand the sort of balance that is needed, so that we basically don't throw out the baby with the bathwater and completely abandon something that is, needed in the world.
Yeah, I was thinking, because I don't know, in my head, like I see in this way. So if you are, let's pretend you are learning how to cook something, like considering like in prehistory, when you needed to learn how to use the fire and these kind of things. So you created a way, and then you started to create that kind of habit and custom to, I don't know, cook in a certain way and use a certain kind of material, because maybe you tested first, I don't know, copper, and it worked in a certain way, and maybe you tested another kind of material, and then you try another one, and then you use that habit of, because you were all cooking and having together a meal, so you were all gathering around this fire, because it was the moment that you could actually cook. So you were gathering around that moment at the fire and cooking and eating, and maybe you created a tradition. And during that generation and some generations after that, that actually was still a good experience and was valid, and it was kind of refined and to get better and better and carry on having that kind of custom and enjoying it in some way and getting the benefits from this. But the thing is, when generations, like when years pass by and it's a big kind of a gap between maybe the first generation that created that tradition and maybe thousands of years later another generation, that hasn't really grown inside that kind of experience of understanding why that tradition was born, like what were the reasons behind doing all that, because maybe nowadays we don't really use the fire in that way anymore, because we actually have kitchens. I'm exasperating, and I'm using a very extreme example, but that kind of behavior of using the pan in a certain way and doing on the thing, and having your own kitchen, that kind of tradition necessarily will be different, because of course we were saying change. Actually, Heraclitus says that the only
constant is change.
Only constant is change, correct? So change is inevitable. So the things will change anyway. But understanding, when you don't kind of have that kind of experience, even from just close generations, and understanding why you do things in a certain way, you kind of lose it. So then there will be like a tendency to just do something completely different, something completely new. So, or maybe because of course change is involved. But the thing is understanding when, as you were saying, is change, I think change per se is inevitable and is good, but when is change used to get better, to progression, and when is actually change leading to regression is what makes the difference. Because traditions can be great for, again, bringing that wisdom and that kind of experience that we need, and habits and customs that are important nowadays. But if we create traditions that are based on wrong foundations, then maybe they're not really good. So it's just understanding what is the thing. So what you were talking before about balance. We're saying, so would it be the key then to kind of understanding and using like when tradition gives that structure and order that's needed, and when you need to be careful to don't make it too rigid, maybe, and then becoming too hard to like you put yourself in a box, kind of the whole community can put themselves in a box.
Of course. Well, like you said, with time everything changes, and with time knowledge gets lost and forgotten. So sometimes we forget the actual essence of the traditions, and then we just stick with we're left almost like with a shell of it, right? But sometimes even that shell is valuable, right? For example, I can give an idea of like Christmas. Even though not many people celebrate Christmas in the most religious way, it's still a good time for them to get together with their family and, you know, have this time where they appreciate the loved ones, etc., etc. But obviously the whole essence is actually forgotten. So, you know, going back to the fact that things get forgotten, also what can happen is that the original people that come up with the tradition, they don't really necessarily understand why they're doing what they're doing. It's just that they do what works. And sometimes with time, when we don't understand why we do what we do, we tend to kind of just abandon it and be like, well, you know, we've been doing this for so long, why not just get rid of it, right? And then when that happens, because we don't really have like whatever new change we introduce, we will have to test it over a particular time frame in order to find out whether it's actually good or not. And I think obviously sometimes we can be very quick to just abandon something completely, bring in this new change and think, oh yes, we're being progressive and this is the new way and it's good. And then, you know, 50 years pass and we start experiencing all these new problems and we're wondering where they came from, and everyone's really confused. And it's actually because we have abandoned that one thing that we didn't actually understand fully how it worked, and we didn't really know the true value of it. Whether because we didn't understand it scientifically, or maybe, you know, we just forgot what the value of it was, what the whole purpose was. So
in this case, what you were saying, time is so important. So for instance, you were talking about Christmas, and it made me think, yes, Christmas, the tradition maybe originally was born to be like together and help others and be good that period, although I think we should be good every day of the year, not just for Christmas. But yeah, so the idea is like that moment to stop and think and share and be all together and think of others, and etc., etc. But change has brought maybe Christmas to be more like a kind of, there is nothing of spiritual in the, there's very little of spiritual in the celebration. It's more about a commercial kind of celebration where you just buy presents for everyone. Sometimes you don't even know what to buy, but you just need to buy it, otherwise that person will not get something and that will not be good. Or maybe just spending in so much money and children having so much, where it's not even more about sharing and being together and caring. In reality, it's more about spending that money and like it becomes the shell, as you were saying, almost like empty, like a shell, rather than understanding that the value maybe of Christmas is actually sharing. Doesn't mean having buying lots of presents for everyone, but maybe sharing, or like about Santa coming and giving you presents. Maybe it's actually teaching children the importance of sharing what they have already without needing to buy something new. Or maybe about sharing like and helping others that time, or like these kind of things where you actually lose that kind of real meaning and tradition. So as I think, as you were saying, time can be very, very an important component, because it does take time. It takes time to experience things, to test them, to make mistakes, make it work, try again. So that's what kind of perfection.
Like a trial and error, isn't it? And I always think of it this way: instead of abandoning things completely, we should actually work on refining them. Because if we want to make something better, and that applies to us on a personal level as well. If we're a practitioner of something and we want to improve ourselves, we don't just, abandon ourselves completely and, just keep starting new things. What we do instead is we practice over a long period of time and we refine ourselves. And I think this is what we have to do with traditions as well. We have to slowly refine them, but never abandon them completely, so that we're still left with that essence. Because in the end, it is usually the kind of spiritual aspect of a lot of traditions that is very important. And now it seems like that is almost completely gone. And it's almost like, getting rid of traditions is almost like, pulling out a chair from underneath someone who's sitting down and, then wondering why have they fallen over, So it's like, it's these structures that have been built on over this really long period of time. And I think it's because they relate to like the basic universal laws of living. And this is why we might not understand them, because, a lot of the times we might actually evolve them when we haven't fully comprehended the whole thing. But it's almost like our instinct, our spiritual instinct, or our instinct to have like a good society, and this is what drives us to it. And then when we get rid of it, it's like we get rid of this root of the society. And then
yeah, because I think the problem is that nowadays, because we live in a modern society and everything is about technology and science and fast pace and business and all these kind of things, the fact that we don't even stop, we're always chasing the next new updated and best piece of anything, of phone or any kind of technology. We don't even give the time to properly understand and stop and test and think. That's what we're talking about, time, that what is important, because nowadays we don't know what's patient. And that is actually, if you
think every few months there's something new, and we're constantly being showered with this new technology and new things, and we have no idea of the consequences long term. And that includes things like food. We stopped having, well, not everyone, but I think slowly people are realizing all of these things, that when we don't share a meal with our family and our close ones at least once in a day, there isn't much to hold the family together. So these things are actually really important, and we forget about them because, oh, now it's so easy to just pick up a takeaway or do something like that. And actually the cooking of the meal can be really important. Similarly with things like technology, it's not the same texting someone constantly to actually having in-person conversations. And also things like relationships, back in the day we used to have proper marriage structures, and now it's like people just hook up, they have a different person every weekend. We really don't know how this will affect us in the long term because we haven't evolved for this.
No.
And
I think actually distances us. The more we focus on technology and all this stuff, like, fast pace and all this stuff, we actually distance us from listening to ourselves and this natural law that you were talking before about. Because if you think, nature has their natural, like, they have the seasons, they have, I don't know, the way when like somebody's growing, it's not just you just put a seed and it will go the day after because you need it now, because you need to sell it or you need to have food now. You have to wait, and there is a reason and there is a wisdom behind it. So the fact that we want to kind of shorten more and more the gap between these kind of natural wisdom and flow of things to just get into having everything now, it is actually, I think it's actually very bad, because it really distances to who we are, and to listen to our soul and its whispers, and being patient and understanding that in order to crop something, you do need to give it the time to grow. Yes. So and in some ways a way as well to distancing us from God and this all universal thing. So it's like we're creating this gap, this becoming more and more widen between the natural things, and that is what deviates. Before we were saying about finding a balance, no, you were saying between good and positives and negatives, and when to keep traditions. In reality, I think a balance is not even enough. It's not about finding the balance there in like what is good in tradition or is not. It's more than that. I think it's about understanding to get closer instead to this natural flow, because the more we get closer to that, the more we get connected to this, the more change, of course, will happen, but the more we will refine these traditions, as you were talking about.
It will be more like a building change where we, build a foundation and we build on top of it. And then after some time, we have like, a full tower built, right? But when we don't have that, it's like we're constantly, trying to, it's like we're throwing, I don't know, stones and hoping that there's going to be like a building as a result of this. And obviously that's not going to happen. And we have all of these distractions because so much is changing all at the same time. We are completely unable to distinguish what thing actually causes a problem. And with people that are being born into this, when I have never even experienced the more traditional side of life, when life was a bit more simple without phones and all of these things, they have no idea. And because we don't fully know, because we're not recognizing, the catalyst of this negative change, then, over time, the whole thing gets lost. And I think, these kind of like natural laws is what keeps societies going. And I think the reason why we don't hear about failures so much is because they never lived to see the light of day. They collapse, societies collapse, and then it's a mystery what happened to them. We only know of the societies that have actually survived, and this is why we carry on these traditions in a way.
But the thing is, at some point things will collapse. It happens, it has to, because if you, and it's true, like I remember back in my days, I didn't have phones. If I have to call somebody, I needed to use the how do you call it?
Yeah, you know everyone's number off by heart.
Yeah, you have to, or you have your little thing with all your numbers. And if you have to meet with your friends, you just knew like, okay, so tomorrow we're meeting here and we're meeting there, and it's okay. And I used to go out anyway, even in the evenings, and my parents trust me anyway. So it's like, it's this kind of things, and the fact of eating all together around a table and understanding, like, and not watching TV or being on phones, and just sharing that moment to I don't know, talk about the day or anything. That is a very valuable, important moment that nowadays doesn't exist. I know many families where the children eat wherever in the house, not around the table for sure, and even not at the same time with the parents. So parents eat another time, children eat another moment, maybe on the floor or on the sofa watching TV. And they don't even realize, children will never understand, because they already don't have that foundation, because it's not happening anymore. So
and we think this convenience actually helps us, but in reality it does the opposite. For example, what you said, you know, when you make an appointment with someone, you just know to meet them there and then it's like, you know, you don't need a reminder on your phone, in your calendar or anything like that. You just know. And also it builds like a trust between you and the person, because you've said that yesterday and you expect them to be that time. There is no, oh, I'm going to be late, can we change this? Everything was kind of more structured, right? So there was more trust. And similarly,
even when communicating and sending a letter. So if you sent a letter in the past, I remember when I was communicating with my cousins in South America when I moved to Italy. So we used to write letters, and the time you write the letter and send it, it's like you have time. It's
3 weeks before someone actually reads it.
Yeah, so you have to wait. And you have to be patient, and then when you get it back, it's so exciting. So it's not like that instant thing of, you know, writing a text and then you expect the answer, and then maybe in that moment it's not even the right moment, it's not, you're not in the good mood or whatever, or you just don't even think through things and you just reply, and that has consequences. Everything has a consequence.
And the same with food, right? We think that you know, if we can eat wherever we want, it's going to be more convenient, it's going to, you know, basically be better for us, because we can eat whenever we want. Isn't that great? You know, we don't have to wait for the whole family to be home and all of that stuff. But actually this produces this kind of weird situation where you don't even have a time to connect with your family. Eating is a ritual in itself, and it's a tradition. That's why we should be eating meals together with our loved ones. It's a time to connect, and it's a special time because it's a sacrament, and we no longer see that as such a thing. So we just consume and we just eat whenever we want, when really the spiritual aspect of consuming food has been completely taken out. And similarly with relationships as well, we think that now if we can, you know, go on a app or, you know, meet 10 people you know, in 1 month, we will be more happy because we will have all of these relationships. But actually what happens is we feel more lonely because we don't have that one person we can always rely on. So everything we think those things will give us, they actually give us the opposite in the long term.
And in some way, these traditions and stuff, they create kind of systems, you know, like the system now, like the system of like, I would call it commercial system of like buying food in a certain way that was produced, you know, by, and they are in supermarket chains and stuff. And then you have this consumption of like even fast food. So you create this, the kind of system as well, buying anything, like buying things on Amazon or buying things everywhere. So you create that, there are these kind of systems that create habits, no? So we know if I want something, most people would go on Amazon and we think, oh, I need it actually with Prime, I can have it tonight. Yeah, so you go and buy it and you have it tonight. Or eating food, like, oh, I don't have time to cook a meal myself, I just buy it 1 day's ready, I just put it in the microwave and I eat it. So it's like this kind of system creates habits that can be quite dangerous in some way. They can actually kind of, I don't know the word to use, but they can regress our way of, we should actually grow, but it does.
Well, maybe talk about the education aspect of that, because
Yeah.
obviously there is a system within the education, and it is not to say that we don't need education, because we do, but obviously the way that the education works right now, it's not actually helping. It's almost like it does, again, the opposite of what we intend it to do. It's not teaching anyone much.
No, absolutely not. In fact, actually, that's my thing. Education, it's maybe it was born with a good intention in some way, because it was a period where there was the Industrial Revolution. So, you know, they were building all these big companies, and they wanted to have to create these, you know, like standard kind of products in big quantities. So they just needed people to go and then work like in a kind of a chain kind of way, you know, somebody's specialized in one thing, the other one in the other thing, etc., etc. So in some way, it kind of, they needed to create this education system and provide education to like open it to more people, so they could be more people kind of educated, so learning how to use and how to better work in the in these factories and in these industries. But the thing is, and of course, from one side it was great, because people started to be more literate. They could actually start to read. There were many people they didn't know how to read. So that was great. But by time, it completely changed. And education nowadays, in terms of provided by standardized systems, is actually completely not good for people. It's actually evil in some way, because it makes us dependent on emotionally dependent, because we depend on marks and things. So we are constantly and needed that kind of external gratification. We don't know who we are. We're actually very often indoctrinated, because somebody tell us what to learn and what needs to be when and how. So it's not even about us anymore. So this system is not about education, as you were saying, because we do need to be educated, but not through schools. That's the problem. Yeah, actually, on that respect, I wrote a book about like the dark side of the education system, the current education system, and why it doesn't work. But as well, I propose a way forward. Like I will talk in my book, and I will actually in my podcast. I started a podcast series as well on magical parenting, that is about understanding what doesn't work, so we can bring a bit of awareness on that. We can embrace change, and I can propose a method I'm putting in place with families and children to bring up, to raise strong children and strong parenting, and keep schools out. I think these systems can be in any kind of other systems that are now created, because one is the education system. I was talking about the commercial system, but it can be as well the NHS system.
NHS or police, for example, you know, all of these things are they are important for the society to function properly. But the problem is that these systems are corrupted. But the thing is, though, and I think this is the whole point of this conversation, is that it is not the system. Yes. The system itself is not a problem, because system is in a way like an entity of itself. It's going to, like, it is needed in a society.
It's again a structure, an order.
It's something that we need.
Yeah.
But what is important is how we exist within that system, because at the end of the day, it is the individuals that make the system work. It's like we fill in the gaps of the system, and the system becomes what we are. So if the system is broken, it's not the fault of the system, it's we that are broken, and we make this system broken. Because the moment we keep, you know, looking at an external factor to give us an excuse for the way things are, we stop looking at ourselves. What are we doing? We're not going anywhere. We have to look at what we can change on a personal level and create and actually try to think of better ways of making the system work, not completely abandoning the system and trying to defund this, defund that, and like have like a complete chaos. That's not going to work because we need these things. These things are not in bad inherently.
No.
It's just that the way they are functioning has become corrupted.
Yeah,
And that's what we need to fix.
Yeah, and I think the problem is, as you were saying, the way they function, because systems nowadays are becoming more and more standardized. And that is the problem. That is standardized. So in education, everything is standardized and everybody needs to adapt. In NHS, everything is standardized. Sometimes you go to NHS to a doctor and actually, if you go on Google, you can find yourself the answer because they just need to follow procedures. Police, everything is just about following.
You have to do this. This is what says in the book.
Because it's like every situation is considered as the same. So
and not every situation.
They are not, because we are all different. Situations are different. People are different. Actually, people are unique. Even situations are unique. So you cannot create a system that is based on standards, and you don't allow the people and situations to actually be considered differently. That's the problem. So the more we get into this standardized concept, or even ideologies, or anything that has to be with seeing us as we are the same and needed to be treated the same, that's where we actually create damages and deviate, but in a very regressive way. And it should be more instead of individuality and focus on our uniqueness and understanding, again, as we always do, understand who we are. That's the whole point of the whole thing. The more we work on ourselves and understand who we are, our uniqueness, and how we can help ourselves to then help society, because everything is about how we work, then we can actually work in a system, cooperating with other people, but still remembering we are all different. And that is where we can have protection, we can have, I don't know, NHS in terms of health, like support for health, support for education, support for anything, because
it's a fine line, isn't it? Because on one hand, we want a tradition that is going to provide a sort of structure, a sort of guide. But on the other hand, we want to be able to be free to take every situation as if it's a new situation. So it's like we have to develop the wisdom to be able to tell apart what is right for this particular situation, where we should apply the rules of the society, and where, for example, sometimes these rules have to be adjusted, because there is, there is just so much variety in life, and we cannot fully categorize everything as the same thing. But of course, it's a difficult thing, and unless we know ourselves and we have enough wisdom and knowledge about how things work, then we will never know which direction to go. And so it's kind of like, we want the traditions to be a sort of map. So it's a map, it's a guideline, it's not the journey in itself. So if the map tells us, oh, go that way, but there is a roadblock on that way, we're not going to push through, right? Or we're not going to just completely abandon the journey and, turn around and be like, well, screw this. No, we're going to find a way around it, and then we're going to get back on the road and get back onto the map where it's telling us to go, instead of just, getting lost and, wandering around aimlessly and forgetting the actual objective of the journey.
Yeah, that Socrates, the ancient Greek, he talked about the just, I think, city and the just soul. And this makes me think a lot of this, like Plato, when he was writing about this, about what his teacher Socrates was telling. And he was saying that in order to create a just city, or state, or in a bigger scale, where things work like properly. So whoever needs to protect will be focused on protecting, whoever needs to work on guiding and ruling will be doing that, and whoever needs to be focused on like goods and exchanging things will be focused on that. In order for this to work in harmony and in a progressive way, not like growing in that way, is by focusing on a just soul. So it's understanding what are your how your system, let's call it system, internally works, and how according to this system we can manage ourselves better. And in that sense, that would be understanding, for instance, the four bodies. So the body in terms of like the physical body, how it works, what are their needs, and make that body rule within his jurisdiction, if I can say, during his place. And then we have the emotional side that, of course, we need it, and there's a reason why we need it, but at the same time making sure that it rules according to what needs to be done and not overtake and maybe lead, but just doing his job. And the same with the mind, doing the job of reasoning and thinking, but again, not ruling, and allowing the soul to actually be the one that's leading the whole thing. And on this respect, is I know that you did a podcast, your first podcast.
Yes, I started a YouTube channel, so my first video is actually on the body, mind, feelings. So we're gonna link that somewhere below in the description.
Yes, and it's actually explaining. You explain about this kind of the three bodies in terms of the body, mind, feelings, and what they are, and that and what actually what the soul is not in some way. And so that would be interesting to watch.
And the next video is going to be about the soul. So what is the soul? That's what it's going to explain.
Yeah, so that would be interesting to watch it. Yes. But that is the important thing, is allowing, according to this concept of Plato's, that allowing every part of your body to do their job, but within their boundaries and within their territory, and not going beyond that, because the soul is the one that should lead. And if we allow the soul to actually rule, that's when we have a just soul. When we have a just soul, automatically we understand what is our place and our position in a society. And if everybody does it, a whole society will be just. But by just, it means working in harmony.
In harmony, yes. And I think the harmony is an important word, because like you said, when we operate from within the soul, we are naturally in tune with these natural laws of God. And I think it's really interesting how, you know, these ancient wisdoms are still so valid today. And the reason for that is because they are timeless, because they are the laws of God.
Yes.
You know, so basically, we have to operate from within the soul, and then we will naturally know how to, you know, which way to go within a society, what things we need to do, and be able to stay connected to this kind of tradition of how things have always operated, but also be able to take a new approach whenever it's needed, and not make, you know, the kind of mistakes that bring about the collapse of civilizations instead, right? So
we can kind of conclude by bringing down the blindfolds and creating a bit more clarity about this topic. So we said that the traditions are important. We need to keep them, but we need to be aware of where they're leading. So we were talking about the positive and the negative aspects, and there is positive as far as we keep the natural laws of God in the process.
And we have to respect these laws, and we have to learn how to live with them. But on the other hand, we also have to remember of the pitfalls and realize that by having everything so rigid, we actually stop the evolution of a society and humanity as a whole. And this is the whole point, isn't it? To evolve into a better functioning society so that we are happier and more fulfilled human beings. And we do that by looking at ourselves and controlling ourselves instead of waiting for the world to change for us. And all the while, making the right choices by being in harmony with the natural laws, and being able to go past the sort of rigid structures that might not work anymore.
Yeah, because again, is this not the system? The problem is when it doesn't work, it's actually because we don't work. Like there is something.
It's how we function within the system.
Yes.
So yeah, I think we can finish on this note, and we thank you for listening and watching, and please like, share, subscribe, and all of that good stuff, and we will see you in the next video.
Yes. Bye.